In 1818, Mary Shelley imagined a scientist who reanimated dead tissue using electricity. 200 years later, we actually do reanimate dead tissue using electricity. Every cardiac defibrillator is a Frankenstein machine. But there's a fundamental difference between restarting a heart and resurrecting a person. That difference is what makes The Bride scientifically fascinating and ultimately impossible. Maggie Gyllenhaal's film updates Shelley's story to 1930s Chicago. Christian Bale plays Frankenstein's monster seeking a companion. Jessie Buckley plays the bride, reanimated from a murdered woman. The premise assumes that electricity plus dead tissue equals new life. It doesn't. And understanding why reveals something profound about what life actually is. Shelley's novel was inspired by real science. In 1780, Luigi Galvani discovered that electrical stimulation makes dead frog legs twitch. The nerves still conduct signals, the muscles still contract. For a moment, the dead tissue moves as if alive. Galvani's nephew Giovanni Aldini extended this work to human corpses. In 1803, he applied electricity to an executed criminal named George Forster. The jaw quivered, an eye opened, one arm raised and clenched. Witnesses reportedly thought the dead man was coming back to life. This is real. This happened. The scientific community was electrified, literally, by the possibility that electricity was the vital force that separated living matter from dead matter. Mary Shelley attended lectures on galvanism. She incorporated the science into Frankenstein. The creature is animated by electrical apparatus, the spark of life that transforms dead tissue into living being. But Galvani and Aldini weren't bringing anything back. They were triggering reflexes in recently dead tissue. The nerves still worked because they hadn't yet degraded. The muscles still contracted because they still contained the chemical fuel for contraction. Given a few more hours, none of it would respond at all. The twitching corpse wasn't alive. It was a machine running out of power, responding to one last input before final shutdown. Here's what The Bride must ignore: the timeline of cellular death. When circulation stops, cells begin dying almost immediately. The brain is most vulnerable. Neurons start deteriorating within 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. The heart muscle lasts slightly longer. Other tissues can survive hours. But survive doesn't mean intact. Cells deprived of oxygen switch to anaerobic metabolism, producing lactic acid. The pH drops, proteins denature, cell membranes become permeable. The organized structures that make cells functional begin dissolving into chaos. After 24 hours, autolysis begins, cells digesting themselves with their own enzymes. After 72 hours, bacteria from the gut spread throughout the body, accelerating decomposition. After a week, the body is unrecognizable as a living system. The bride's source body is a murdered woman. Murder investigations take time. By the time Dr. Euphronius, Annette Bening's character, obtains the corpse, how much cellular function remains? The film is set in the 1930s, before refrigeration was widespread. A murder victim in Chicago's summer heat would decompose rapidly. The brain, the organ that stores memory and personality, would be largely gone. You can't reanimate what no longer exists. The bride might twitch, but she couldn't think, remember, or feel. Drop a comment if you've thought about this before. The timeline problem applies to every resurrection story. Suppose we solve the timeline somehow. Instant preservation. Perfect cellular restoration. The tissue is as fresh as when she died. Can you bring back the person? Memory isn't stored like data on a hard drive. It's encoded in synaptic connections, the patterns of links between neurons. Approximately 100 trillion synapses encode everything you know, remember, and are. These connections are physical structures, proteins arranged in specific configurations, dendritic spines shaped by experience, neurotransmitter receptor densities that determine signal strength. Death disrupts these structures. Even brief oxygen deprivation causes synaptic degradation. Longer deprivation causes wholesale destruction. The patterns that encode memory dissolve into chemical noise. Reanimating a body after death would create a functioning organism, perhaps, but not the original person. The memories would be gone. The personality would be gone. Whatever emerged would be something new, constructed from the ruins of what came before. This might be the most tragic aspect of resurrection scenarios. You don't get your loved one back. You get a stranger wearing their face. The bride might explore this territory. The original woman was murdered. She had a life, relationships, history. Does the bride remember any of it? If not, is she the same person? What does it mean to be brought back if nothing that made you survived the process? These philosophical questions are more interesting than the technical impossibilities. Defibrillators restart hearts. That's real. When the heart enters fibrillation, chaotic electrical activity that prevents pumping, a strong electrical shock can reset the rhythm. The heart stops completely for an instant, then restarts in organized beating. This only works if you act quickly. The heart muscle must still be viable. The patient must not have been dead too long. Minutes matter. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation maintains minimal circulation until defibrillation is possible. Modern emergency medicine has extended survival windows significantly. People who would have died a century ago now survive cardiac arrest regularly. But survival isn't resurrection. The patient's heart stopped, but their brain remained oxygenated enough to preserve function. They weren't dead in the biological sense. They were in a potentially reversible crisis. True death, irreversible cessation of brain function, cannot be reversed. Once the brain is gone, the person is gone, regardless of what happens to the body. Christian Bale plays the original creature, seeking a companion. This raises its own questions. The monster in Shelley's novel is assembled from multiple corpses, different arms, legs, organs, combined into a single body. Victor Frankenstein explicitly describes gathering materials from charnel houses and dissecting rooms. This is biologically absurd. Tissue rejection would kill the creature instantly. When foreign tissue enters a body, the immune system attacks it. This is why organ transplants require immunosuppressive drugs. Without them, the recipient's body destroys the donated organ. A creature assembled from multiple donors would face rejection from every component. Every part would be foreign to every other part. The immune response would be overwhelming and fatal. Modern medicine has learned to minimize rejection through tissue matching and immunosuppression. Shelley's Frankenstein has no such tools. His creature shouldn't survive its first breath. But the creature does survive for decades. The bride presumably continues this impossibility. The dramatic question isn't whether the biology works, it obviously doesn't, but what the creature's existence means. Gyllenhaal sets The Bride in 1930s Chicago during Prohibition. This historical placement creates interesting tensions. The 1930s saw major advances in understanding electricity and biology, but also saw the rise of scientific racism, eugenics, and Nazi medical experimentation. Playing God with human bodies had real-world horrors that fiction couldn't match. Chicago in the 1930s was also a center of organized crime, political corruption, and social upheaval. The murder that produces the bride's body could connect to this underworld. The reanimation could be commentary on exploitation, literally stealing a woman's body for someone else's purposes. The film apparently includes a wild and radical cultural movement in its plot. This might reference actual 1930s countercultures, the Harlem Renaissance, labor movements, avant-garde art scenes. The bride could become a symbol of liberation or a cautionary tale about playing with forces beyond control. Science fiction set in historical periods often uses anachronistic science to illuminate real historical tensions. The Bride's 1930s setting might be more important than its reanimation premise. The Bride probably isn't trying to be scientifically accurate. It's trying to be emotionally true. Shelley's original Frankenstein wasn't about the science of reanimation. It was about creation and responsibility, loneliness and rejection, the consequences of ambition unchecked by wisdom. The creature's tragedy is that he exists without asking to exist, rejected by his creator and society. A Bride story extends these themes to questions about women's autonomy. The original Bride of Frankenstein, 1935, featured a creature created specifically as a companion for another creature, her existence defined by someone else's needs. That's a powerful metaphor for how women's lives have historically been subordinated to men's desires. Gyllenhaal's version might reclaim this narrative. The bride as protagonist rather than prize, her murder as origin story that she transcends rather than defining wound. The outlaw lovers mentioned in the plot description suggesting she chooses her own path. The science will be wrong. The themes might be profound. That's an acceptable trade for mythic storytelling. The Bride reimagines Mary Shelley's Frankenstein for 1930s Chicago. The reanimation premise is scientifically impossible. Cellular death is irreversible. Memories don't survive brain degradation. Tissue rejection would be fatal. But galvanism was real science in Shelley's time. Defibrillation is real medicine now. The gap between twitching dead frogs and resurrecting murdered women is vast, but the original inspiration came from genuine discovery. The film's value won't lie in its biology. It will lie in what it says about creation, autonomy, and second chances. The bride who chooses her own existence despite being designed for someone else's purposes is a compelling character, regardless of whether her existence is possible. Christian Bale and Jessie Buckley are serious actors. Maggie Gyllenhaal is a thoughtful director. The result might be beautiful, even if it's biologically absurd. Subscribe for the breakdown after release, and tell me in the comments, what would you want to remember if you were brought back?